From the podium, obviously there are responsibilities which lie clearly with the member states in terms of measures to take in terms of health protection. And you know that the European Commission has adopted a whole series of proposals since the spring which are addressed to member states on how to coordinate their actions in this field. At the moment, we have a discussion underway on a proposed recommendation to the Council which was made by the Commission recently on some of those specific aspects, and in particular the definition of strategies for protecting health and to get out of the crisis situation in which we all find ourselves. The Commission is still looking at all of the aspects which need to be taken into account in order to define strategies that are actually effective, but I don't know that we're going to act on the basis of a single element or a single decision from a court today.
Je vois que tu as encore ta main.
I see that you still have your hand raised for a follow-up. Thank you very much. Well, am I wrong in thinking that you're asking member states insofar as possible to not take decisions which block mobility, but you don't consider barriers to mobility as a problem for fundamental rights in the Commission? Well, if it's linked to the question of fundamental rights, in that case I need to give the floor to Christian to give you a more specific answer.
Alors, concernant la libre...
With regard to free circulation, free movement, you know, it's a right in Europe, and that's laid down in the treaties and the Free Movement Directive. But what's also clear and has been clearly laid out in our proposed recommendation and the guidelines that the Commission has issued within the framework of a public health emergency, that member states may take restrictive measures in that context. And our proposal, which Eric mentioned and which was discussed between member states at the time, needs to be looked at precisely in that context, because it's important for the Commission to not restrict free movement unless it's strictly necessary, and if it is done, it's important to do it in a proportional and non-discriminatory manner. And I would add, Griselda, that at the European level, when we talk about free movement, generally we refer to free movement between member states. Now, that's the competence of the European Commission. Now, obviously, there is a hierarchy of legal principles which prevails that member states have to respect. As far as we are concerned, we have only concentrated on a free movement between member states, and as far as that specific dimension is concerned, the respect of the principle of free movement under the non-discrimination aspect that Christian mentioned before. Any other questions on this subject?
Je vois que David...
Okay, David, I see you have a follow-up question. Okay. rhetoric was on the proposed recommendation restriction of freedom of movement, which you talked about, which has been discussed in the Council, and the decree which was adopted yesterday by the Italian government, which imposes restrictions to people arriving from France, Belgium, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, and so on and so forth. I was wondering whether you felt that it was a good idea to adopt this sort of decree before an agreement has been reached at a European level, or whether it would actually be better to wait for the recommendation. Now, one of the measures which has been laid down is a test. So 72 hours before arriving in Italy, before travelling. But if you look at a country like Belgium, you sometimes have to wait at least 72 hours for the test to arrive. So we're in a situation where it's very difficult to present this test. So how are we to deal with these real problems for people who have to travel? Thank you. Thank you, David. On the Italian measures, is it a good idea or not? Well, what we think is that what is a good idea is for member states to agree among themselves on the proposal which was made by the Commission, and that's what we're going to be focusing our work on. The second question there, I'd like to hand the floor to Christian. Well, this is one of these issues which is being discussed. We think it's very important that we improve coordination between member states when it comes to quarantine measures, for example, and testing. So I'd have to ask you to just wait until we conclude our negotiations. And has just been said, what's particularly important for us is that we find an agreement as quickly as possible, and we hope we will be able to find an agreement on tests and quarantine as well. Thank you. Thank you, Christian.
Je ne vois pas.
I see no further questions on this subject. Thanasius' question, you have the floor.
Attack it from another angle, because meanwhile people are losing their money. You go for a test of 72 hours, then you go to the airport, you don't have the test results, or you receive the test results 5 minutes after the gate closes, and you lose your plane, you lose your ticket. You cannot be refunded for that, especially with some Greek airlines that go to Greece from Belgium, from here in Brussels. They refuse boarding in the flight without the test results. These people will not be refunded under the current regulation. What happens to their tickets? You know, people, consumers, European citizens lost their tickets last year with the vouchers situation. It was very hard to get your money back. I still have 3 personally that I did not receive any money from. And now we have this case when it's a gamble whether you will get into the plane or not. So, leaving aside the restriction of movement angle, what's going to happen from the consumer perspective, the one who buys a ticket and is refused boarding into the plane? Thanks.
Go ahead.
Okay, now it works. Well, thank you, Athanasius, for this very concrete illustration of why it is important to have better coordination on the travel restrictions measures, on the testing and quarantine requirements. This is exactly why the Commission has come forward with this recommendation on the 4th of September, and why we've been pushing for better coordination for months before that already. So, as I said, we are working on this with the member states and hoping for a swift agreement. concretely for consumers, you know that regarding the passenger rights and the issue of vouchers, the Commission has also been very active. There is a long list of ongoing infringement cases on this. I don't have the latest now with me, but we're happy to inform you about that bilaterally if you're interested. But as you know, the Commission has also been very active on this to ensure that the rights of European consumers are fully respected under the Package Travel Directive and also regarding the passenger rights. So I think that's where we are now.
Atanasio, you have a follow-up?
I mean, those who are refused entry into a flight because of this lack of coordination. I don't want to call it lack of coordination. If you ask me personally, refusing the entry into a country of a country's citizen, it's a whole other legal issue that is not for here now to discuss. But still, are those people going to get their money back when there is coordination? Thanks.
Well, it's always difficult for us to comment on individual cases without knowing all the circumstances. But clearly, in the future, the coordination should be improved, and such issues should be avoided in the first place. Whether any specific consumer can get their money back in his specific case, that's something to clarify with the relevant national authorities. Where also there are consumer authorities there that can be contacted, and of course that is a matter then to clarify in the individual case. But on the European level, I think we have done everything to clarify the situation. And let me remind you also that even if a member state has not brought this legislation in line yet, it is nevertheless consumer has the chance before a court to get redress. So this is a basic principle, but I'm not going to comment on individual cases that I don't know in detail.
Thank you, Christian. Athanasios, I think we also need to all keep in mind that we are facing an extremely fluid situation where many dimensions come into play at the same time and are constantly evolving. The health situation per se, that is to say the number of cases and therefore the severity of the measures which member states believe are required in order to protect people's health. Secondly, obviously the availability of tests, the time necessary to process those tests. All of these things are challenges which Europe collectively, all the member states, and indeed countries across the world are facing at the moment. And the legislation which you are referring to when it comes to consumer rights obviously is one dimension, but it clearly was not foreseen for this specific type of circumstance. And therefore, when it comes to assessing what is the best way forward on all of these issues, we also need to take a step back, realize that we are facing a situation which is completely unprecedented, and that governments and the European institutions are trying to find solutions at the same time on all these different dimensions, and that it's anything but straightforward. And therefore, clearly, we have to take things one step at a time. It is important that everybody takes precautions, be it from a health point of view, be it from a travel point of view, be it from a professional point of view, so that we can all get through this together.